My parents sued me because I ran away from them, but I became a military general, and I found out that my father didn't serve, so I handed him a draft notice. I never really understood what it meant to feel safe, at least not in the way most people do. Growing up, I was the kid who flinched at loud noises and avoided eye contact with adults. It wasn't because I was shy or timid. It was because home wasn't a sanctuary for me. It was a battlefield. My earliest memories are laced with fear, a constant, gnawing anxiety that hung over me like a dark cloud. My parents were strict, but not in the way that demanded respect. They ruled with an iron fist, their discipline crossing the line into abuse more often than not. The beatings were frequent, sudden, and always for reasons that seemed insignificant to the outside world. A broken dish, a bad grade, even a perceived look of disrespect could trigger my father's rage. My mother wasn't much better. If anything, she was more meticulous in her cruelty. Where my father used his fists, my mother used her words, slicing through any sense of self-worth I might have had. They worked in tandem, a relentless duo that made sure I knew I was nothing, worthless. School was supposed to be an escape, a place where I could find some relief from the torment at home. But it turned out to be just another arena where I was forced to fight for survival. My teachers, instead of offering support or guidance, seemed to take pleasure in making my life even more difficult. They singled me out, perhaps because I was quieter than the other kids, or maybe they just sensed the weakness I carried like a scent. The bullying from the teachers was subtle at first, harsh words, unfair grades, constant criticism, but it escalated as they realized I had no one to defend me. One teacher in particular, Mr. Evans, seemed to have made it his mission to break me. He was a large man, intimidating in both size and presence, with a voice that could silence a room. He was notorious for his strictness, ruling his classroom like a dictator. Any small mistake was met with harsh punishment, often public humiliation. He once made me stand in front of the entire class for what felt like hours because I hadn't completed an assignment on time. His eyes bored into me the whole time as if daring me to challenge his authority. But I wasn't completely alone in my suffering. Many of the other students saw what was happening, and while most were too afraid to stand up against the teachers, a few of them began to show me kindness in their own ways. It started small. An extra pencil when mine broke. A whispered word of encouragement after I'd been berated by a teacher. Over time, these small acts of kindness grew into something more. I found myself surrounded by a group of kids who understood what it was like to be on the receiving end of unfair treatment. They weren't the popular kids, or the ones who excelled academically. They were the misfits, the outcasts, the ones who didn't quite fit into the mold the school tried to force us all into. We formed a bond, an unspoken understanding that we were in this together. When one of us was singled out, the others would find ways to show their support, even if it was just a shared look of sympathy. It was during one of Mr. Evans' infamous tirades that something remarkable happened. He had zeroed in on one of my friends, Jack, for something trivial. His shirt wasn't tucked in or his hair was too long. I don't even remember the exact reason. But this time, instead of standing by and watching, the entire class erupted. It started with a murmur, a low buzz of discontent that quickly grew louder. Students began to speak up, challenging Mr. Evans' authority, calling out the unfairness of his actions. It was as if a dam had broken, and all the frustration and anger that had been building up for years finally spilled over. I watched in stunned silence as my classmates stood up to a man who had ruled over us with fear for so long. Chairs were overturned, books were thrown, and Mr. Evans, for the first time, looked genuinely afraid. The chaos was overwhelming, and though the riot was quickly quelled by the arrival of other teachers, and eventually the principal, the damage had been done. That day changed everything. Mr. Evans was put on leave, and eventually he never returned to the school. The administration tried to downplay what had happened, but they couldn't erase the fact that a group of students had stood up to the tyranny we had all endured for so long. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental to us. Despite the harshness of school life, I found solace in the friendships I formed. There were 6 of us who became inseparable by the time we reached high school. Jack, the rebel with a cause, who had been the first to challenge Mr. Evans. Emma, who was fiercely intelligent and had a dry wit that could cut through the bleakest of days. Ben, the quiet one, who spoke only when he had something important to say, but when he did, everyone listened. Sarah, who was kind and compassionate, often acting as the peacemaker in our group. Mike, the prankster, always ready with a joke or a scheme to lighten the mood. And finally, Lucy, who had a strength about her that belied her small stature. She was the glue that held us all together. We were a mismatched bunch, each of us carrying our own baggage, But together we found a kind of peace that we couldn't find anywhere else. We often skipped school, not because we were delinquents, but because we needed to escape, even if just for a little while. We'd run off to the countryside, exploring the woods and fields, talking about everything and nothing. Those days were the happiest of my life, where the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the seven of us and the freedom we found in each other's company. As high school came to an end, we all faced the inevitable: what to do next. None of us had particularly high hopes for the future. Our grades were mediocre at best, and our teachers had written us off as a lost cause long ago. But we were determined to stick together, no matter what. When we all managed to get accepted into the same university, it felt like a miracle. We didn't care much about the prestige of the school or the programs they offered. All that mattered was that we were together. University was a different kind of challenge. The freedom we had craved for so long was finally ours, but with it came responsibilities and pressures we weren't quite prepared for. The world outside the safety of our group was harsh, unforgiving, and we often found ourselves struggling to keep up with the demands of our courses. But we had each other, and that was enough. Our friendship deepened during those years. We shared everything: our fears, our hopes, our dreams. We became more than friends. We became a family. We'd still escape to the countryside whenever the pressures of university life became too much, spending nights under the stars, talking about where we saw ourselves in 10 years. The future was always uncertain, but as long as we had each other, it didn't seem so scary. Graduation came faster than any of us expected. Suddenly we were adults, expected to find our place in the world. None of us were ready to go our separate ways, so we made a pact. We would go to Washington together. The city represented opportunity, a place where we could start fresh and, hopefully, find the success that had always seemed just out of reach. The move to Washington was chaotic. We pooled what little money we had, found a rundown apartment that barely fit the seven of us, and set about the daunting task of finding jobs. Those first few months were some of the hardest of my life. The city was vast, impersonal, and we quickly realized that the world didn't care about us or our dreams. Rejections piled up, and the weight of failure began to take its toll on all of us. But we refused to give up. We'd been through too much together to let the city break us. Slowly, we started to find our footing. Jack landed a job as a mechanic, something he'd always been good at, but never thought he could make a career out of. Emma got a position at a local bookstore where she could immerse herself in her love of literature. Ben found work at a tech startup where his quiet, analytical mind was finally appreciated. Sarah became a teacher, determined to be the kind of mentor we never had. Mike, unsurprisingly, became a bartender, his charm and quick wit making him a natural in the role. Lucy, always the nurturer, got a job at a community center, helping kids who were in the same kind of situations we'd been in. And me? I struggled the most to find my place. I bounced from job to job, never quite finding something that felt right. The city wore me down in ways I hadn't anticipated. The beatings from my parents, the bullying from teachers, it all seemed to catch up with me. But my friends never gave up on me. They were my rock, the one constant in a life that had always been turbulent. Then, something happened that changed everything. It was a warm summer evening, and we were all gathered in the tiny living room of our apartment, celebrating Jack's promotion at work. The mood was light. The future seemed bright for the first time in a long time. But then the phone rang and everything shifted. It was Lucy's mother. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw the color drain from Lucy's face as she listened. When she hung up, she looked at us with wide, terrified eyes. Her father had been in an accident, a bad one. He was in critical condition, and the doctors weren't sure if he would make it through the night. We all piled into Jack's old van and drove through the night to get to the hospital. The journey was silent, the air thick with fear and worry. Lucy's father didn't make it. He passed away before we arrived, leaving her shattered in a way I'd never seen before. The days that followed were a blur of grief and helplessness. Lucy withdrew into herself, pushing all of us away. We didn't know how to help her, didn't know how to pull her back from the edge. It was the first time our friendship felt fragile, like it might not be enough to get us through. But we rallied around her, refusing to let her slip away. Slowly, painfully, she began to heal. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but eventually she came back to us. The experience changed all of us, though. We weren't the same carefree group of friends who had escaped to the countryside whenever life got too hard. We had seen how quickly everything could fall apart, and it made us hold on to each other even tighter. The move to Washington, the struggle to find our place, the loss we endured, It all bonded us in ways I can't fully explain. We had been through hell together, but we had come out the other side stronger, more determined to succeed. And succeed we did, each of us finding our own path in the city that had once seemed so daunting. Looking back, I realized that those early years, the abuse, the bullying, the struggle to find my place in the world, they all shaped me into who I am today. They taught me resilience, the importance of friendship, and the value of never giving up, no matter how hard things get. We're still in Washington, still navigating the ups and downs of life. We don't live together anymore, but we're never far apart. We see each other every week, catching up over drinks or dinner, reminiscing about the past, and talking about the future. We've become our own little family, one that isn't bound by blood, but by shared experiences and a deep, unshakable love for each other. After that summer in Washington, things started to change for all of us, though our bond only grew stronger. We were no longer the lost kids wandering through life aimlessly. Each of us had found our footing, secured our jobs, and for the first time, it felt like we were actually moving forward, instead of just surviving. Jack was the first to find a stable job. He had always been good with his hands, so it made sense that he ended up as a mechanic. But Jack didn't just settle for working in someone else's garage. Within a year, he became the lead mechanic at a high-end automotive repair shop in the city. Jack had a natural gift for fixing things, and he could diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it. His boss, impressed by Jack's skill and work ethic, gave him more responsibilities, and soon Jack was managing the entire shop. But he wasn't content with just that. He began to take night classes in automotive engineering, learning everything he could about the latest technologies in car manufacturing. His dream was to open his own shop one day, and every spare moment he had was spent planning for that future. Emma, with her love of books, found a job at a local independent bookstore called The Last Chapter. It was a small, cozy place nestled between a coffee shop and a bakery, the kind of store where you could lose yourself for hours. Emma quickly became a favorite among the regular customers. She had a way of recommending the perfect book, almost like she could see into your soul and know exactly what you needed to read. Within 6 months, she was promoted to manager. Under her guidance, the store began to thrive, becoming a hub for the local literary community. Emma organized book readings, writing workshops, and even a small literary festival that drew in people from all over the city. Her quiet confidence and deep knowledge of literature made her an irreplaceable part of the bookstore's success. Ben had always been the quiet one, the thinker. His sharp mind and love for problem-solving led him to a job at a tech startup called Neuronics. The company was small, just a handful of employees working out of a cramped office space. But Ben saw potential in what they were doing. The startup was focused on developing AI software that could predict market trends, and Ben quickly became one of the lead developers. His analytical mind was perfect for the job, and within a year, the company had secured major funding, thanks in no small part to Ben's contributions. Neuronics grew rapidly, and Ben found himself in a high-pressure environment, managing a team of developers. But he thrived under pressure, and his ability to see solutions where others saw problems made him invaluable. Despite the long hours and the stress, Ben loved his work, and it showed in the company's success. Sarah had always been the compassionate one, the friend who would listen to your problems and offer advice without judgment. It was no surprise that she became a teacher. She got a job at an inner-city school, where most of the kids came from tough backgrounds. Sarah's classroom became a safe haven for her students, a place where they could escape the hardships of their lives, even if just for a few hours. She had a natural gift for teaching, and her students flourished under her care. But it wasn't just about academics for Sarah. She was deeply invested in their well-being. She started after-school programs, brought in speakers from various professions to inspire the kids, and even organized field trips to give them experiences they would never have otherwise. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed, and she was soon promoted to head of the English department. But for Sarah, the real reward was seeing the impact she had on her students' lives. Mike, always the life of the party, found his calling behind the bar. He got a job at a trendy cocktail bar called Speakeasy, where his charisma and quick wit made him a hit with the customers. Mike had a knack for mixing drinks and an even better knack for making people feel welcome. It wasn't long before he started experimenting with his own cocktail recipes, and his creations became the talk of the town. The owner of the bar noticed Mike's talent and gave him more creative control, allowing him to revamp the drink menu. The bar's popularity soared, and Mike became something of a local celebrity. But he didn't stop there. Mike had bigger dreams. He started saving up to open his own bar, a place that would combine his love of mixology with live music and a relaxed atmosphere. He began networking with musicians and artists, laying the groundwork for what would eventually become The Hideout, one of the most popular bars in Washington. Lucy, who had always been the nurturing one, found her place at a community center in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. She started out as a volunteer, helping with after-school programs for kids. But her passion and dedication quickly led to a full-time position. Lucy had a gift for connecting with people, and she became a trusted figure in the community. She worked tirelessly to improve the lives of the people she served, whether it was helping them find jobs, organizing food drives, or simply being there to listen. Her work didn't go unnoticed, and she was soon promoted to director of the community center. Under her leadership, the center expanded its services, offering everything from job training to mental health support. Lucy's impact on the community was profound, and she became a beloved figure in the neighborhood. As for me, I struggled for a while to find my path. I bounced from job to job, never quite finding something that felt right. But everything changed when I stumbled upon an opportunity to work in a role that would alter the course of my life. I was recruited by a private military contractor, a role that would eventually lead me to become a commander-in-chief. It wasn't a path I had ever envisioned for myself, but as I rose through the ranks, I discovered a strength and leadership ability I hadn't known I possessed. The work was grueling, often taking me to some of the most dangerous parts of the world, but I thrived in the chaos, the responsibility, and the challenge of leading teams in high-stakes situations. My past, with all its pain and struggle, had prepared me for this in ways I hadn't realized. The resilience I had built over the years became my greatest asset, and I quickly gained a reputation for being unflappable in the face of danger. 3 years passed in a blur of hard work and relentless pursuit of our individual goals. But through it all, we remained close. Our weekly meetups were sacred, a time to unwind, share our successes and failures, and remind ourselves that no matter what happened, we had each other. During one of these meetups, an idea started to take shape in my mind. We had all found success in our own right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were meant to do something more, something bigger, together. The idea of starting a company had been in the back of my mind for a while, but it wasn't until that night that I voiced it to the group. "We should start a company," I said, the words hanging in the air for a moment before anyone responded. Mike was the first to speak. "A company? Doing what?" "That's the beauty of it," I replied. "We all bring something different to the table. Jack, you're brilliant with your hands and know the automotive industry inside out. Emma, you have a gift for managing people and creating a community. Ben, your tech skills are unmatched. Sarah, you understand people. And Lucy, you're a leader who knows how to build something from the ground up. And I've got experience leading teams in the most challenging environments. We can do anything we set our minds to." The room was quiet for a moment as they all processed what I had said. Then Lucy spoke up. "I think it's a brilliant idea," she said, her voice steady and confident. "We've all come so far, but I think we could do something truly amazing together." And just like that, the idea took root. Over the next few weeks, we met regularly to flesh out our plans. We decided to start a company that combined our strengths, a consulting firm that offered a unique blend of tech solutions, community engagement, educational programs, and entrepreneurial support. We wanted to create a company that not only made money but also made a difference in the world. We called it Unity Solutions. Starting a company from scratch was no small feat. There were endless meetings, legal paperwork, and financial hurdles to overcome. But we were all in, 100%, and our determination carried us through the tough times. Jack took on the role of Chief Operations Officer, COO, overseeing the logistical side of the business. His experience managing the automotive shop proved invaluable as he streamlined our operations and made sure everything ran smoothly. Emma became the Chief Marketing Officer, CMO, using her talents to build our brand and create a strong online presence. She crafted our company's narrative, emphasizing our mission to create positive change in the world. Ben was our Chief Technology Officer, CTO, developing the software and tech infrastructure that would become the backbone of our business. His innovations allowed us to offer cutting-edge solutions to our clients, setting us apart from the competition. Sarah took on the role of Chief Human Resources Officer, CHRO, ensuring that our company culture reflected our values. She was in charge of hiring, training, and maintaining the morale of our growing team. Her empathy and people skills made her the perfect fit for the job. Mike, with his entrepreneurial spirit and connections in the nightlife industry, became our Chief Business Development Officer, CBDO. He was in charge of securing new clients and partnerships, and his charm and negotiation skills were instrumental in bringing in business. Lucy, naturally, became the Chief Executive Officer, CEO. Her leadership experience at the community center made her the ideal person to steer the company's vision and keep us all focused on our goals. As for me, I took on the role of Chairman and Commander-in-Chief. My job was to oversee the strategic direction of the company, ensuring that we stayed true to our mission, while also expanding our reach and impact. It was a role that required me to draw on all my experience from the past, both in the military and in life. As Unity Solutions grew, we faced our fair share of challenges. There were moments when it felt like everything was falling apart, but we always managed to pull through. One of the first major shocks came when we secured our first big contract, a multi-million-dollar deal with a government agency. The project was complex, involving everything from tech development to community engagement, and it required us to work around the clock for months. But just as we were on the verge of completing the project, disaster struck. Ben's software crashed, wiping out weeks of work in an instant. It was a devastating blow, and for a moment, it looked like we might lose the contract. But Ben, ever the problem solver, refused to give up. He worked nonstop for 48 hours straight, rebuilding the software from scratch. The rest of us pitched in where we could, offering support and encouragement. And somehow, by some miracle, we managed to deliver the project on time. The client was thrilled, and the success of the project catapulted Unity Solutions into the spotlight. But the shocks didn't stop there. A few months later, we were hit with a lawsuit from a rival company, accusing us of stealing their intellectual property. The accusation was completely unfounded, but it threw us into a legal battle that drained our resources and tested our resolve. The stress was overwhelming, and there were moments when it felt like we might not survive the ordeal. But Lucy, with her calm and steady leadership, kept us focused on what mattered. She handled the legal team with grace and determination, and eventually, the lawsuit was dismissed. The experience left us bruised, but also stronger and more united than ever. The biggest shock of all came when Jack was involved in a serious accident. He was on his way to a client meeting when his car was hit by a drunk driver. The impact was severe, and Jack was rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The news hit us like a ton of bricks. Jack was more than just a colleague, he was family, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. We spent days at the hospital, waiting for news, hoping and praying for a miracle. The doctors weren't sure if he would make it, and even if he did, they warned us that he might never walk again. It was a dark time, and the stress of running the company without Jack took its toll on all of us. But Jack, in true Jack fashion, defied the odds. Slowly, painfully, he began to recover. His road to recovery was long and arduous, but he never gave up, and neither did we. We adapted to his new limitations, finding ways for him to contribute to the company even while he was still in a wheelchair. Jack's determination to keep going, even in the face of such adversity, inspired all of us to push through our own challenges. Despite the setbacks, Unity Solutions continued to grow. We expanded our services, brought on new clients, and hired more staff. But no matter how big the company got, we never lost sight of why we started it in the first place. We were in this together, and that bond was what kept us grounded. As Unity Solutions entered its third year, we reached a point where we had to make some tough decisions. The company was growing faster than we had ever anticipated, and it was clear that we needed to expand our leadership team. We began bringing in outside experts, people who could help us take the company to the next level. It was a difficult transition, especially for a group that had always done everything together. But we knew it was necessary if we wanted Unity Solutions to reach its full potential. One of the new hires was a man named David Ross, a seasoned executive with a background in corporate finance. David was sharp, ambitious, and had a reputation for getting results. He quickly became an invaluable part of the team, helping us secure new funding and streamline our financial operations. But David also brought with him a different approach to business, one that sometimes clashed with our values. Tensions began to rise when David proposed a partnership with a large corporation known for its questionable ethics. The deal was lucrative, but it went against everything Unity Solutions stood for. The team was divided, with some seeing the deal as a necessary step for growth, while others, including me, saw it as a betrayal of our mission. The debate came to a head during a heated meeting. Voices were raised, tempers flared, and for the first time it felt like the bond that had held us together for so long was starting to crack. But Lucy, ever the leader, stepped in and brought us back to what mattered. She reminded us why we had started Unity Solutions in the first place, and that no amount of money was worth compromising our integrity. In the end, We turned down the deal, a decision that wasn't easy, but was ultimately the right one. It reaffirmed our commitment to each other and to the values that had guided us from the start. And while David eventually left the company, we learned a valuable lesson about staying true to who we are, no matter how successful we become. As I sit here writing this, reflecting on the journey we've been on, I can't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. We've come so far from those scared kids who banded together in the face of adversity. We've built something incredible, something that none of us could have achieved on our own. But more than that, we've built a life, a family, and a future that we can be proud of. The road ahead is still uncertain. There will be more challenges, more shocks, and more tough decisions to make. But I know that as long as we stick together, there's nothing we can't overcome. Unity Solutions is more than just a company. It's a testament to the power of friendship, resilience, and the belief that we can create something better. And no matter where the future takes us, I know that we'll face it together, just as we always have. When you think your past is finally behind you, it has a way of showing up at the most unexpected moments. For me, it was a knock on the door that changed everything. It was a cold, gray morning when my parents appeared at my doorstep. I hadn't seen them in years, not since I moved to Washington and started building a life that felt like my own. Seeing them standing there, my father with his stern face and my mother with that familiar look of quiet disdain, brought back memories I had long tried to bury. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. My father didn't waste any time. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the house. My mother followed, her eyes scanning the place with thinly veiled disapproval. I closed the door and took a deep breath before turning to face them. "What do you want?" My father didn't sit down. He just stood in the middle of my living room, arms crossed, as if he was the one in control here. "We know about the company you've started. Unity Solutions." A cold chill ran down my spine. "So what?" "So what?" he echoed, his voice rising. "You think you can just run away from your family and build something like this without giving us our due?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What are you talking about?" "We're your parents," my mother chimed in, her voice cold and sharp. "Everything you have is because of us. We deserve a share of it." I stared at them, stunned into silence for a moment. The audacity of their demand was staggering. "You can't be serious," I finally managed to say. "We are," my father replied. "You owe us, and we're here to collect. We want the company, all of it." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You've got to be kidding me! There's no way in hell I'm giving you the company." My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You ungrateful little shit!" he spat. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? What you've done for me?" I shot back, the anger boiling up inside me. "You beat me. You broke me down. You made my life a living hell. And now you want to take away the one thing I've built on my own? No, not a chance." My father stepped closer, towering over me. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "I'll take you to court if I have to. I'll ruin you." I didn't back down. "Go ahead and try," I said, my voice cold and defiant. "But you won't win." They left soon after, but not before my father made one last threat. "You'll hear from my lawyer," he said as he walked out the door. I stood there in the quiet that followed, trying to process what had just happened. The idea that my parents would try to take the company from me was absurd. But knowing my father, I knew he was serious. He would go to any lengths to get what he wanted, and he wouldn't care who he hurt in the process. I didn't have to face this alone, though. The first thing I did was call Lucy. As always, she was the calm voice of reason. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll fight this together." Over the next few days, I brought the rest of the group up to speed. We held an emergency meeting at Unity Solutions, sitting around the large conference table that had seen us through so many challenges already. The atmosphere was tense as I explained what had happened. "They can't do this," Jack said, his voice filled with anger. "It's not right." "I agree," Ben added, his usual calm demeanor showing signs of strain. "But we need to be smart about how we handle this. Your father is playing dirty, so we need to be ready." Emma, always the one to think things through, leaned forward. "We need a plan, a good one. First, we need to get you the best lawyer we can find." Mike, who had a knack for knowing the right people, chimed in. "I think I know someone. Let me make a few calls." True to his word, Mike came back the next day with the name of a top-notch lawyer, Charlotte Hayes. She was known for being ruthless in the courtroom, and she had a track record of winning impossible cases. When we met with her, she didn't disappoint. "This is going to be a tough fight," Charlotte said, laying out the legal papers in front of us. "But it's not one we can't win. Your parents don't have a legal leg to stand on, but that doesn't mean they won't make this as painful as possible. We need to be prepared for anything." Jack, never one to sit back and wait, took it upon himself to dig up dirt on my father. "If they want to play dirty, we'll give them a taste of their own medicine," he said with a determined look. Jack's investigation turned up more than any of us expected. He found records of my father's abusive behavior from when I was a child, including a police report from a neighbor who had called the cops after hearing one of the beatings. It wasn't much, but it was enough to paint a picture of the kind of man my father was. Meanwhile, Ben used his tech skills to dig deeper into my father's past. What he found was a bombshell. My father had always claimed to be a proud military veteran, something he used to intimidate and control those around him. But Ben discovered that my father had never served in the military at all. He had forged documents to make it look like he had, but in reality he had dodged the draft. "This is huge," Ben said when he presented his findings to the group. "If we expose this, it will destroy his credibility." Sarah, who had connections in the social services sector, dug into my father's history even further. She uncovered a dark secret that shook me to my core. My father wasn't my biological father. He had married my mother when she was already pregnant with me, and they had kept the truth hidden all these years. "How could they hide something like this?" I asked, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. In a way, it explained so much about my childhood, and the way my father had treated me. "They were ashamed," Sarah said softly. "But this changes everything. It means he has no legal claim over you or anything you've built." Lucy, always the strategist, took all the information we had gathered and began crafting our defense. "We're going to tear him apart in court," she said, her eyes cold and determined. "He has no idea who he's messing with." As the court date approached, tensions ran high. My father's lawyer was a sleazy man named Gerald Simmons, known for taking on dirty cases and using underhanded tactics to win. He filed countless motions to delay the trial, hoping to wear us down. But Charlotte was relentless. She countered every move they made, refusing to give an inch. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was packed, with both sides ready for battle. My parents sat at their table, looking as smug as ever, while my friends and I stood together, ready to fight. The trial began with my father's lawyer making a long-winded argument about how my parents had sacrificed everything for me and deserved a share of my success. But when it was our turn, Charlotte stood up and delivered a scathing rebuttal. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper claim to have supported their son, but the evidence tells a different story," Charlotte began. She then presented the police report that Jack had found, detailing the abuse I had suffered as a child. The courtroom was silent as she read the report aloud, the words hanging heavily in the air. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't look at me. My mother kept her eyes fixed on the table in front of her, her face pale. Next, Ben took the stand. He presented the evidence that my father had never served in the military, as he had always claimed. The forged documents were displayed on a large screen for everyone to see. The courtroom buzzed with shock and disbelief as Ben explained how he had uncovered the truth. Sarah was up next, and she dropped the biggest bombshell of all. "Your Honor," she said, addressing the judge, "we have evidence that Mr. Harper is not, in fact, the biological father of my client. This not only invalidates any claim he might have over my client's assets, but also calls into question the entire basis of this case." The courtroom erupted into chaos as the revelations sank in. My father's face turned ashen and he finally looked at me, but I didn't see the power and control he had always wielded. Instead, I saw fear. The judge called for order, and when the room settled, Charlotte delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, it's clear that this case has no merit. The claims made by Mr. and Mrs. Harper are baseless, and they have no legal right to my client's company or any of his assets. We respectfully request that the court dismiss this case in its entirety." The judge nodded, clearly unimpressed by the arguments presented by my parents' lawyer. "I've heard enough," he said. "This case is dismissed. Mr. Harper, Mrs. Harper, you have no legal claim to your son's company. I suggest you leave this courtroom and not waste any more of the court's time." My parents sat in stunned silence as the judge banged his gavel. It was over. We had won. As we left the courtroom, a sense of relief washed over me, but there was still one last thing I needed to do. I approached my father, who was slumped in his seat, looking defeated. "I'm not done with you," I said, my voice low and steady. "You've lied and cheated your entire life, and now it's time to pay the price." I handed him a document, his draft notice. Because of Ben's discovery that he had dodged the draft, I had used my position as commander-in-chief to ensure that my father would be held accountable. "You didn't serve when you were supposed to, so now you will," I said. "You have no choice." He looked at the document with wide eyes, his hands shaking. "You can't do this," he whispered. "Oh, I can," I replied, "and I have." He looked up at me, his face twisted with anger and fear, but there was nothing he could do. The law was clear, and for once he was on the wrong side of it. As we walked out of the courthouse, my friends and I were greeted by a wave of reporters. The case had attracted a lot of attention, and the media was eager to get our reaction. But we didn't stop to talk. We had nothing more to say. We returned to Unity Solutions, our sanctuary, and gathered in the conference room where we had spent so many hours planning and strategizing. The mood was celebratory, but there was also a sense of exhaustion. The fight had taken its toll on all of us. "Thank you," I said, looking around at my friends. "I couldn't have done this without you." "We're family," Lucy said with a smile. "And family sticks together." Jack raised his glass. "To Unity Solutions," he said. "And to us. We've been through hell and back, but we're still standing." "To Unity Solutions," we all echoed, clinking our glasses together. As the celebration continued, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. We had won, but more importantly, we had stood up to the people who had tried to take everything from us. We had shown them that we were stronger together, and that no matter what challenges came our way, we would always have each other's backs. The road ahead was still uncertain, and I knew there would be more battles to fight. But with my friends by my side, I was ready for whatever came next. We had built something incredible, and nothing could tear us apart. In the days that followed, the news of our victory spread. Unity Solutions became a symbol of resilience and determination, and our story inspired others who were facing their own battles. We received letters and emails from people all over the country, thanking us for standing up to injustice and for proving that no matter how tough things get, you can always come out on top if you have the right people by your side. And as for my father, he was shipped off to fulfill his long-overdue military service. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. He had spent his life pretending to be something he wasn't, and now he was being forced to face the consequences. As we continued to grow Unity Solutions, the bond between us only grew stronger. We were more than just business partners. We were a family, forged in the fires of our shared struggles and triumphs. And no matter what the future held, I knew we would face it together. Life had thrown everything it could at us, but we had survived, and in the end, we had won.